Nippon Paints. Live with colors.
Parchment and awards.
The Board of Management of General Kotelawala Defence.
President Ranil Wickramasinghe highlighted the significance of preparing the armed forces to face future threats, while addressing the General Convocation of the Kotelawala Defence University yesterday evening. He noted that the security skills and strategic skills of the armed forces should be utilised, if the country wants to survive. President Wickramasinghe emphasized the importance of having increased defense allocations as the country is looking at an economy that will be highly competitive and export-oriented. Acknowledging that there may be questions raised as to why the government is focusing so much on the armed forces, and why the government is looking at Defense 2030, he said that if not, the country will not have a future. None of us want the armed forces to go to war or to fight anywhere. That is not what we have to do to defend the country. But we are living in a different world from what we were born into. When we were born, there was no tussle for the Indian Ocean. At one stage, no one wanted it. Today it is not so. If we are to survive, the skills, the security skills, strategic studies, all that has to be utilized, he added.
Honors in computer engineering.
It gives me great pleasure to talk to you today. Remember, on Monday, I was at the COP27 meeting, Sheikh Al-Sham. I was speaking with the President of Rwanda, who told me that you have a very good institution, university, and our cadets are being trained there. I was really surprised, and also in a way, I must say, I also felt that our university here has made a name in other parts of the world. This is, I think, only one instance. I don't know how many defense universities are there where the females take more awards than males. Very soon you may have to have a separate category for males. I can see the ladies are quite happy when they heard that. But this institution has made a mark on our life. I remember in 1981, when we witnessed Sir John Kotelawala in his last days handing over this building to start the university. You have come a long way. Now you must think of the future of the university just as much as we think of the future of the country, because you are part of that heritage. You are not something outside that. Kindly remember this position. Firstly, you have attained your mark in the civilian streams, that there are many who like to enter the KDU rather than a normal university. To carry that forward, I've asked the Ministry of Finance, the Secretary Defence, to look at starting another campus of the KDU, mainly for civil subjects, to be started in Kurunegala. Why Kurunegala? That was the constituency that was represented by Sir John Kotelawala in 1931. So the people of Kurunegala should get the benefit, and I've already asked the Treasury to set aside monies to upgrade the hospital in Kurunegala to a teaching hospital. So Vayamba will be one of the two districts in Sri Lanka where there is more than one teaching hospital, which is good for the people. But more than the civilian studies, we have also to look at the future of our country, the future of our security, and what role the university is going to play there. I have noted that your increased your endeavors to ensure that middle level officers and senior level officers also receive the postgraduate education either through this institution or the National Defence College, that many of the 1-star officers and 2-star officers also benefit from it. That is necessary. We should go further. One of the objectives of Defence University is to ensure that the top leadership and the middle leadership are all educated and their level of leadership is increased, that you have one of the best military leaderships in the region. This is what we have to do. Secondly, is to look at the strategic studies and to keep improving the study of strategy, and that too in addition to the NDC and the KDU. I've also looked at and I've asked the legal draftman to redraft the new law to establish an Institute of Strategic Studies where it will be open for those who are so willing to become members and take part in it. So the Institute of Strategic Studies, this university and the NDC, and hopefully we're talking with the Foreign Minister of restructuring the Lakshman Kadirigam Institute, that will have 4 institutes that will be involved in the study of security and strategy. Now some will ask, why are you focusing so much on the armed forces? Why are we looking at Defence 2030? It is because if we don't think of it, we will not have a future. I am not asking none of us want the armed forces to go to war or to fight anywhere. That is not what we have to do. We have to defend the country, but not to go out. But you are living in a different world from what we were born earlier. When we were born, there was no tussle for the Indian Ocean. At one stage, no one wanted it. Today it is not so. And if we are to survive, then we are skills, security skills, strategic studies, all that has to be utilized. We are looking at an economy that will be highly competitive and export oriented. You can't have export oriented industry unless you have the freedom of navigation, unless you can take your goods around. If the freedom of navigation is interrupted, what will happen? We've seen in 2021 what happened when people could not move out of a country and the goods could not be transported, either by land or by sea. The total economies broke down. Even today, in Europe, some of the economies are just recovering. China has still to recover. UK recovered, went down. And remember that our future depends on our ability to get our goods across. And this environment we are in will not be one controlled by us. The actions of other people will impact on us in Sri Lanka. So in that, we have to use our political skills, our diplomatic skills, and our military skills to ensure that our right of navigation, the right to come into Sri Lanka and go by sea and by air is not interrupted in any way. So all these three skills are necessary if you have to do it. That's why if you are building a country, you must also look at the future. We could have managed without this earlier. In the 70s, as I became minister, all this was not required. Most of the people are not focusing on the Indian Ocean, but on the Pacific and the Atlantic. Today it's not so. Today the total competition in the world has gone from US and Russia to US and China. So what happens in Russia is only a sideshow. What happens in this area is far more important. So we have to be ready for it. What are the economic strength that you require? What are the political strengths that you require? What are the military skills that you require? What are the military strength you require? How do we gather this? How do we go through it? So this is the issue that we are faced. And this started in 2007. I remember after Prime Minister Abe addressed the Lok Sabha, and he referred to a book by Prince Daura Shaku on the confluence of the two seas. The two seas were taken to be the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and how this should come again. And from there developed this whole issue, the whole strategy of operating on two seas to contain, to get mastery over the two seas. China came up with the same maritime Silk Route, which was the traditional Silk Route. So China on one hand had the Silk Route, and the others had the two oceans. The two oceans became the cod as competition increased between China and the others. And China itself has now come on to the Indian Ocean following Japan. Everyone wants to secure their trade routes to Indian Ocean. We are all for it. But we must ensure that our trade routes are also secured. And all these countries, the smaller countries, can exist. So how do we do it? That is the issue. How are we going to get? We cannot have increased competition. We are not the competitors. But we will become the victims. So we can't allow that to happen. Sri Lanka's position is that we are not involved in big power rivalry. We don't want big power rivalry. Whether the US is in the Indian Ocean, we have no objections. We have no objections to the Japanese or Chinese or others being there, as long as there is no rivalry. Because we are the littoral states and we have to look after our interests. The largest of them is India, and naturally being the largest littoral states, India would like very much to ensure that there is no threat to them. But we all accept that there should not be a threat to any of the littoral states. So we can work on it. But it should not lead to a competition or a rivalry which will be a threat to all of us. This is what we have to avoid. This is how we have to work on. Then one part of it is diplomacy. One part is politics. The other part is the strategic studies and security. So this is a place, this university, together with the other institutions, can and should certainly develop those skills. I have already spoken with King's College London of ensuring that their war studies department, one of the best in UK, will certainly be corresponding with this university and the National Defence College. The interaction between that institute and this will help us. We must also look at interaction between other such universities, courses, and Sri Lanka. So this is what we have to build. First, we must build an economy that is outward looking and that can grow at about 7 to 8%, so that we can catch up on what we have lost and go further. It's around that we all have to realize how the environment has to be built up. We have witnessed, we are the country that comes under pressure for many things, for things which we haven't done, for things which are not responsible, or for imagined threats of others. So this is the issue that we are faced with. We should not allow any country to think that we are a threat to them or actions are a threat to them. So we have to think very clearly before we act on any issue. But at the same time, we must ensure that the vast majority of the states, littoral states in the Indian Ocean that are neutral and that don't take sides are certainly not pressurized by any of the people to join a side. We don't want to be pressurized, I must say that. Certainly, it's not only the issue of the competition between the Cod and the China that will be dominating the sea. You can witness in the Western Asian waters that UAE, Emirates, is building up a navy, and so will Saudi Arabia. Emirates Navy will operate around here. They can operate ports, they can operate a navy, and it's a factor that we have to reckon as far as the Western Indian Ocean is concerned. So there are new powers that come in. In the Bay of Bengal, Myanmar and Bangladesh are also building up their naval strengths. So that is the other issue. There will be other smaller players who will come into the region. Then outside what's happened in the ocean, the one act on land which is going to influence us very much is the situation in the Himalayas, where 3 nuclear powers are facing each other. And it's in our interest to ensure that this stability and peace are maintained at all times. But for us, we have to look from our point of view. As a small country that doesn't want to get involved in the big power rivalry, which wants to keep the Indian Ocean open for all, to ensure freedom of navigation, the freedom of undersea cable. So Sri Lanka may be the first country in Asia. We are preparing legislation on the undersea cables. So we may be the first country in Asia to pass legislation regarding the protection of our undersea cables. So we are taking our own steps. In addition to what is required militarily, remember the blue economy. We have a full ocean that we have to make use of. The blue economy itself has to be safeguarded. And there are non-state actors, maybe pirate fishing, maybe human trafficking, and most of all drugs. All that takes place within the blue economy. So we have to counter all those measures. This is why strategy is important. This is why we have to work together. The bigger countries will look at their own interests and their own competition with others. Smaller countries haven't got that. So we have to learn politically to work with all the other countries which are not being involved in the big power rivalry. Because it's a question of either we get pressured by them or they get pressured by us. So it's far better to be in the latter position than to be in the earlier situation. So this is what we must work for. and our policy should not in any way harm anyone. But we should look after the interest of the global commons of the sea and what is then this interest to us, both as a livelihood and as a means of transport. So we shall continue to engage in and discuss the freedom of navigation in the Indian Ocean. But I think we must also look at how the law of the sea can be upgraded. The law of the sea conference was nearly 40 years ago, and there is many developments, and it is necessary for the law of the sea conference to be upgraded. We have to realize the interest of the other littoral states in the region, especially our neighbor India, but it should be done, and we must also at the same time act on safeguarding our interests economically, politically and socially. I don't want to take many more of your time, but I was the other day reading the work of Prince Dura Shah Khan. He was the son of Shah Jahan, grandson of Akbar, and he was a Muslim scholar. He wrote on Muslim studies, he wrote on Hinduism, he wrote on both the Vedas. He studied the extreme forms of Hinduism and of Islam, and finally he brought about this book, Confluence of the Two Seas. At that time we were wondering, how can he write about the confluence of two seas, Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, because in the 17th century there was no Pacific Ocean. No one even knew it. That was named long after. So that's what led me to do some reading on him. And his book was called Samudra Sangam Grantha. The Samudra Sangam Grantha said different streams having their sources in different places, all mingle their water in the seas. The confluence of the two seas that he referring was nothing to do with either the Indian Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. The two seas he was referring to was on one hand Hinduism and the other hand Islam. And there was this big conflict between Hinduism and Islam going on in Mughal India. And he advocated that there was so much in common between these two religions that they should meet together like two rivers going to the ocean. So it was not a book, or the Grantha did not in any way ask for rivalry or the world to be divided into two. It asked for world to be one in the region. So that is what we should follow. After all, there's the commonality in Asia is more than the differences. Differences are only regarding who has the power, who should dominate in some areas. The commonalities are more. After many centuries, after a few centuries, again the economic power and the military power is returning to Asia. In those instances, while acknowledging that there are rivalries which have to be accommodated, we must all learn together, work together as to realize the common aspirations of making Asia the leading economic region in the world. So that does not mean in any way that there will be rivalry. Rivalry is good to a certain extent, but we must also look at the cooperation. So Sri Lanka's view is that, and we'll work on it, and for that purpose, I think the KDU is one good place to start with. Now, before I conclude, I must also refer to one other matter. The Galle Dialogue was not held this year, but we are looking forward to holding the Galle Dialogue next year in a much bigger way to commemorate the 75 years of independence of Sri Lanka. So I thank you for having invited me, and I wish all the prize winners all the best in life. Thank you.
For more latest news, subscribe to FTTV.